All right, so we're excited to have Tom Gerstenberger here tonight. Tom arrived in the Northland in 1955 when he came to Northland College. He's well known throughout the area, having taught and lectured here for the past 50 years. He says that he stayed in the field as long as he has because he had so many enthusiastic people that he taught. Many of us here tonight are former students, whether in the formal classroom of one of our many schools or on a field trip learning about waterfalls, quarrying, or other subjects. So without further ado, let's welcome Tom.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. I don't know if I'm better with the mic or without it. Can you tell?
Yes.
Without it?
Yeah, a little farther away.
How about this place? Is that better? Or?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Whoa. I just blew it all down and turned it way up. I can see that. Okay. We're going to talk about Brownstone quarries tonight. I'm not going to include very much on buildings because you have all the stuff you want on buildings here in Washburn. And you have some absolute experts here. And I just want to mention a couple things to call your attention to that. The first one is this, Wood, Stone, and Water, which is written about the city of Washburn, written by at least 3 of them are in the room here that I've seen. And so they are experts on this stuff, and they tell you all about the buildings and where they're from. So my talk tonight is just going to be about the quarries and all the stuff that went on back in those years and where they were, and we'll take you to them via the slideshow. So I think you'll find it interesting. There's another book, though, very much like it, and I don't see it right now, but that's from Bayfield. I don't want to slight the Bayfield people either, but, oh, here it is. And this is a walking tour of Bayfield. And they list the brownstone buildings in here and where the stone came from and all those kinds of things. I said, tonight I'm just going to tell you about quarries, where they're located, how they were formed, how many people worked in them, all the things that they did. And I think you'll find it kind of interesting. During the break or afterwards, if you want to look, I have one of the little books up here that we use for our class. Now, I teach a brownstone quarry class where we actually go out and this thing seems to keep going in and out. Maybe it's my ears.
It's good right now.
Is it good now? Okay. And this lists all of them, shows all of them, and so if you want to browse through that, I'll just throw it up here on the front table during our break or afterwards if you want to look. Everybody that took one of my classes has these, so there's lots of people in the room that have them. Okay, brownstone quarry is relatively new here in the United States compared to the rest of the world. In the year 1200, they started using stones.
Instead of you hold the mic straight out.
This way?
Yeah.
How's that? I don't know. Okay. And around the 1200s, they started using stones over in Europe. But it took a long time to get over to this part of the country. It wasn't until the 1600s that stone started to be used in a lot of different places. And it wasn't until 1734 that the first building was made in the United States. And that was the Trinity Lutheran Church in Boston, was the first building made all out of brownstone. In our area, at least in Ashland, the first building made was the Catholic Church, was the first building in Ashland made out of brownstone. So there's lots of them around. Washburn's got tons. You can look them up in the book, but just to give you an idea of what's going on. Okay, the first quarry in Bayfield County opened in 1885. Okay, and so that's been quite a while ago. But if you look at the first picture, this is what an old quarry looks like. Okay, we've got lots of them up here, and I'll explain all of those in the second half. We'll visit all the quarries. My first half, I'm going to give you the background and all the stuff about it and what's in it and all of those kinds of things. So, if you look at the map, you'll see that this is the south shore of Lake Superior, all the way over to Michigan. And all that little dotted stuff right along here, this is brownstone, all the way through here. All these little dots are brownstone quarries that were known. They're not all on there. We have 9 right over here by Fort Wing and Bayfield.
And I'll show you all of them and talk about them, like I said, in the second half. But this just shows you where they were. Brownstone is a sedimentary rock, and it was deposited when Lake Superior was Glacial Lake Duluth, which was much bigger. And then these sandstones were laid down. Brownstone is a sandstone. That's what it is. And sandstones come in various degrees of hardness. And if they aren't real hard, then they can't be used for anything because they fall apart. And if it's a softer stone, it can be used as a term called rubble, which maybe you're not familiar with, but that stone that just breaks up and falls apart. And it's used as fill. And so rubble is used in old railroad crossing bridges. They dump the stuff in there to keep from erosion. They just throw it in there, rubble. There's one building in the area made out of rubble. Has anybody seen it or know where it is?
Port Wing.
Port Wing, absolutely. As a lot of you in here were in my class, and you've seen this one. But it's an old garage in Port Wing, and it's right on the main drag. As you will drive down towards the lake, you'll go by it, and it's all just odds and ends pieces. There's no continuity to the building. There's no nice rows or straight columns. It's just all over the place. Rubble was cheap stone. It didn't cost much. They were throwing it away. The other stone was very expensive. The big problem with the area over from Washburn to Superior is there was no place in that area to cut or trim stone. And so there are no buildings, which is pretty surprising. If you drive that way, when you see all the buildings you have here in Washburn and in Bayfield and in Ashland, and most of the quarries you'll see are going towards Superior, and yet there's no buildings that way. And that's because they had nobody to cut the stone to the pattern. And so consequently, there weren't any built there. In the old quarries, which were first started here in the 1800s, they did not have any power. And so everything was done by hand, which is kind of a hassle. But if you look here, these are your quarries. This is the area where the sandstone is. And there are three kinds of sandstones along here, if you'll notice. The Chequamegon, the Devil's Island, and the Orienta. Okay? And so if you look at the colors here, you can see this is Orienta, that's along here. This is Devil's Island, that's in here. And it goes out to Devil's Island, which makes sense. And this is the Chequamegon, all of this sandstone over here. Now if you look, those lines indicate where you find the quarries and where you find the sandstone. This is what's been made famous in the last 10 years. That's where the ice caves are, in the soft brownstone, right in here. This area right through here. And there's where the caves actually are. And that soft stone that crumbles and is beat away by the waves and beaten up, so it can't be used in building structures. But it's beautiful. And if you follow that line out, there's caves here, there's caves on Sand Island over here, there's caves on Devil's Island over here. If any of you have boats and go out in the islands, that's the main caves. There's caves on every island. If you look, you'll find some small one someplace. But then there's also a straight line that does the same thing, and that is right through here. Okay? If you follow out here and going through Washburn, out through Bayfield, through Basswood Island, right through here, through Hermit Island, through Stockton Island, those are a series of brownstone quarries also. There's quarries on those three islands, Basswood, Hermit, and Stockton. And I'll get into those in just a little bit and show you a little bit about them. Let's see where we want to go here. This is what a quarry looks like today. Not much, okay? The reason is, of course, they're filled in. The trees grew. You see growing out of the banks, there's trees hanging down, everything. This is an inland quarry. Most of our quarries are shoreline quarries, right along the lake. Because back in the days when they were first setting up, there was no transportation. There never was a railroad that ran from Washburn going west. Okay, it never came to Cornucopia, never went to Herbster, never went to Port Wing. And so none of those places had railroads, so all their stone had to be shipped how? By boat, out on the lake. And so those quarries were all set up on the lake shore, and then big derricks were set up, which I'll show you some of those later on in the show. And these were to lift the stones onto the boats or out of the quarries and up to the top. But everything west of where we just were was hauled by boat. The railroad coming to Ashland was probably the biggest thing in this area for development. Once the railroads came to Ashland, Ashland really boomed. I have a little statistic here, I'll read it. I found in Ashland Daily Press, I don't know if you know, there's an almanac from 1890. Have any of you seen that? Somebody showed that to me the other night, gave me and I looked at it. And in 1890, the Ashland Daily Press said Ashland had a population of 9,890. And then in 1895, it went up to 12,310. And then a little later, it went up to 18,642. And this is from the almanac that the Ashland Daily Press printed in 1880, and I thought that was kind of interesting. What made that big population boom? This was part of it. Okay, brownstone, iron ore, logging, okay, fishing. These were all big businesses along the shore. And once the railroad got here, logs could be hauled south, rocks could be hauled south. When I show you my first quarry, you'll see the first quarry on Basswood Island. The rocks went down to Madison, and they hauled them down to there to build the building. And so there was no way to get stuff out of here until that time. So it didn't boom, it didn't go. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Ashland was booming, so was Washburn. You had another whole village out here. What was that? Houghton, that's correct, which was totally associated with the brownstone quarries. I'll show you some of those quarries in the second half also. So this was a really big boom for this area in the 1900s when the railroads came to Ashland and things could be hauled. How many of you recall seeing log rafts being pulled by out here in Lake Superior into Ashland? We used to live right out of town here at the foot of Nevers Road on Lake Superior, and in the 60s they were coming through there a lot with these big rafts hauling logs from over in Canada, taking them into Ashland to put them on the railroad and shipped out of here to the mills. There were also mills in Ashland at the time. So this was a really busy, booming area. And two of the main things that caused that were brownstone quarrying and iron ore. Iron ore was big in the Pinocchio Range. You're all familiar with that. What's the nickname for Ashland? The ore doctors, right? And so they were hauling all this ore. We didn't have any ore mines right here in Ashland or Washburn, but they were over along the Pinocchio Range and over towards Ironwood. And they hauled them back here and put them on that great big ore dock, which is no longer, or many ore docks, they had more than that at the time. And that's how all this stuff got out of here. So that was just a huge boom. When they started quarrying, however, this is the way it started, and it's almost unbelievable. They used a big sledge, a chisel, a wedge, and they would start breaking these pieces off. Now the way it's done, or was done then, when they first started, was they would use a chisel and put holes in there. And I don't know if you can see these, but see that hole, and that hole, and that hole. They would punch holes down along here, and then they would wedge that piece off, excuse me, with a big pry bar. These holes were punched deep by a long pipe. Do any of you remember going to the History Museum over at Port Wing? They had one in there. It's a pipe hole from the floor down here about this tall, and it had a hole down the middle of it so they could push water to it to flush the hole out. And on the bottom of the hole is an X, just like that, okay? That's the drill. They'd pound that and turn it, pound that and turn it, pound that and turn it. So some poor guy was holding that bar, and some other guy was swinging a big sledge down at him. That would be kind of a scary job to have, with that guy swinging that thing at you. But that's how they did it. That's how they started it, by hand. And this is what they got out, these big blocks. It's almost amazing that they could do this by hand. It became so much easier later on. When the quarries didn't have power, when they didn't have any kind of mechanical power to run them, they hired between 50 and 250 men to run a quarry. Once they got some power into the things, then all their channelers and all their stuff was done by steam engines, and you could run a quarry with between 10 and 35 people. And you'll see that whole difference when I show you some of the pictures of the people there. So when they first started, there were big numbers of people employed. Problem with that, however, is what? Quarrying is seasonal. Just like logging is seasonal, right? Just like fishing is seasonal. Almost all of our businesses up here were seasonal businesses. And they only did quarrying in the summer months. When it started to freeze, they shut them down. And they didn't do any more quarrying until the next year. Now, to show you, because this picture shows it so nicely, if you look back here, that's dirt, right? All these quarries, or all this brownstone, is under the dirt. You gotta find it, okay? They found most of it along here, however, by doing the shoreline. If you take your boat and you drive along the shoreline up here, you can see the rocks very clearly when you're looking in, because it's been washed away. And on top of the rock, you'll see between usually 6 and 12 feet of soil on top of it. And that had to all be pushed out of there and moved out of there. Now that was a job when they were just men using shovels and some horses. Just to get it clear was a tremendous amount. Can you imagine getting these huge blocks all the way up to the top of that pile? Well, they have big derricks, which you don't see here, and I'll get to those in a minute, to lift the blocks out of the hole. Those things weigh several tons a piece, those blocks. Several tons a piece. So they could not be lifted by people. They had to have derricks, which they hooked on them, and I'll show you them doing that in a little while also. Here's a typical crew at a quarry. Now, if you start counting the number of people in the picture here, you would say that this quarry was probably one of the early quarries before they had steam power in the quarry. So they had to have a lot of manpower, okay? And so if you start counting all the people in there, I think there's a good 30 or so people on that picture. But those big rocks are hooked up now, and you can see it very clearly here. A derrick over here with a big beam, and then they're hooked to these. And when they started, they had horses that would pull that. And so this cable went down here, and they had horses over here, and the horses would walk away. Now I think it went totally dead. I don't know. The horses would walk away, and this block would lift up. Then the guys over here would have to pull the thing by a,
Yeah.
would it be better if I just talked without it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do that, all right? It makes more sense to me, okay? So then the guys would grab that cable on the side, and they would just pull it to get this out of the quarry. So the horses would lift the block, they'd pull it over, the horses would back up, and they'd set the blocks back down on top of the quarry. It was a lot of physical work, a lot, okay? Here you see steam power, see it? You see the smoke coming up over here, and this is a channeler right down here. I'll show you one up close in a little while. But the channeler is the thing that makes these nice smooth cuts. Now Brownstone does that all by itself. And some of you won't believe that, I'm sure. But if you have property along the shoreline of Lake Superior and you have brownstone, you will have places where it's cut off as even as this, where it just split apart by itself. That's why you can quarry brownstone, because it has that tendency to split along an even line, just like that. But to make it do it, they had to do some work, and I'll show you. Okay, here we are actually cutting them out. Now this is a drill over here on this side. It's a little drill here, and this is a channeler over here. The channeler cuts this line. You see it there? They drill the holes with this, okay? And they just drill holes, drill holes, drill holes. And then they put the channeler on it and cut holes, cut holes, cut holes. They cut down the line from one to the other. Most of the blocks that came out, most of them, were 8 feet by 4 feet by 2 feet. But they took whatever they could get because they were costs a lot of money for the people to work on this. And if they had to take a 3-foot block or an 8-foot block, they took it. It was that simple. But most of it was done by channeling or drilling. Here's a nice spot inside the quarry. You can see how smooth those walls are, right? That's been sawed. Like you would take a saw and saw a board. That's what a channeler does. It goes down in and saws that rock. I love the ladders they made back then too. They're all round logs and pieces that they put on there, and it's just really unique. Again, if you look way up here, what's this? Dirt. Okay, the top of the thing was covered with dirt. They moved that back. That's their job that they have to do. Here you see the channel line that they're making. See right in here? That's where they're cutting it right out, so those blocks will come out. Now, in this particular area, excuse me, the first quarry was the Basswood Island Quarry. How many of you been on Basswood Island? How many have been to the quarry? Some of you I know have. You've been to them with me in some of my classes. We've gone out to them. But the Basswood Quarry is down here, right down on this end of the island. There's 2 quarries. Now, almost always, a quarry has many pits, okay? And that's confusing to some people too. They say, well, they only say we had the Prentice Quarry here, and there's 4 of them right there. Well, they were all part of the Prentice Quarry. The company came in, would set up, and they would drill and cut and take out what they could, then they'd move over and start another one. Then they'd move over and start another one, until the stone was no good anymore. So almost all quarries had 2 or 3 or 4 pits with them. And when they ran out of stone in one, they just moved their stuff to the next one. And they didn't want to go far because they had to move all of these things. But there were 2 quarries, companies, and at least 4 quarries on the island. You see here's the Breckenridge Quarry, and right here is the Basswood Island Quarry. Now the Basswood Island Quarry is the one that produced the stone for the Milwaukee County building, okay, in Milwaukee. That stone came from here. Here's a picture of it, okay? Basswood Island Quarry, 1868, and there's the Milwaukee County Courthouse, the picture of it down in Milwaukee. That building is still there. It has been added on to. It is not exactly like this anymore, but it's still there. They have added on to it. Most of these brownstone buildings, and this is amazing to me, lasted 100 years, 120 years, and many of them are still lasting. In fact, your bookstore is in one. It's still lasting good, right? They need to be repaired like any other building. You got to patch up and do things. But you'll notice that the cut stone is much more expensive than the regular stone. And so if you look at the buildings and you go around on the back side, you'll find most of them have irregular stone. The fronts are nice, neat stone that is cut and just the way you want. The way they cut these, and I'll show you this in the next section a little bit when we get to the actual quarry, is they're kind of, brownstone buildings are built like, did you ever have with your kids a paint by number book? This paint is a 6, you put yellow there. This paint is an 8, you put blue there. That's the way these buildings were built. And I'll tell you more about that later on, but and when you'll see pictures of it. This is where you would come in to Basswood Island. There's a little boat landing there, and this is where the old dock was. This is where they hauled the stone out of here. The dock on the island today is on the other side of the island. It's not the one for quarry. This was all torn down. But this is what the actual quarry looked like. Now again, this was away from the shoreline. Then there's a quarry that fills with water. The shoreline quarries, you couldn't go below water because they'd fill on you and you couldn't work in them. But you could go inland, and if you got away from the lake, then you could go down way below the lake and keep doing the rock until it was gone. Most of the brownstone wasn't more than 15 feet deep, though. And then you'd run out of brownstone. That was about the biggest deposits you had. What's this room in here, maybe 10? Something like that, I don't know. So if you can figure, you get an idea of how deep they could go. But if they went away from the lake, the quarry's filled, just like this. And this is the actual picture I took at the Bassett Island Quarry, filled with water. Here's down by the shoreline, and along the shoreline, they pile the rocks up because they were all taken out by boats. And so they put a dock out here, and then they'd have a big crane to lift it to the dock, and then they'd have a big crane to lift it from the dock onto the boat. So they needed several of those to do that. Here's an old photograph. I don't know when this was taken because I don't know how far back they had cameras. But I got this from the Port Wing Museum. And almost all the old pictures you saw, I should give them credit, were from the Port Wing Museum. They had all kinds of stuff on the quarries, and they have several quarries all around there. And they saved them. And we got to use them for our book that we put together for the class and so on. So this, I'm going to guess this was taken in the early 1900s. But that's a guess. I don't know. There was also a quarry on Hermit Island. Now this quarry you can see from the boat. You cannot see the other quarries on the islands from the boat. They're inland. So you got to get out and go on the island if you want to see them. Okay? This one you go right by, and they usually have, and I'll show you the next picture. Right where that mine sign is where it was. And there's a big pile of rocks. They're there yet. At Brownstone. So as you go by on your boat, you'll see them piled up there. In fact, I'll show you the picture, okay? Here, this is a picture out at Hermit Island. So how many of you have seen this when you're going by in your boats? Okay, quite a few of you. Great. This is a kind of a unique place, Hermit Island. Have any of you gone on it? How many have been on Hermit Island? Oh, a few of you, not too bad, okay? There's no boat landing, but there is a beach on the other side of the island, on the west side of the island. This is on the east side of the island. But you can pull right into the rocks and tie up here if it's not a real windy, rough day, and we did. We walked in here, and it's kind of like one of those old movies where was it Indiana Jones or one of those guys went back in these caves and into this stuff. That's kind of looks, you go into the big quarry, the big pit, rocks pile up all over. It's really a step into history. It's really neat, okay? This was built by Frederick Prentice, who owned the quarry on the island, and this has a unique story in it. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look it up if you want. But he built this house for his new bride to come and stay out on Hermit Island with him while he was running the quarry. The stories say she stayed about a month. And she was from out east, and she packed up and left because she couldn't stand it. They were the only people on the island, okay? There was nobody else out there but this quarry and the building that he put on it. And so she up and left him because of this. And this is our last island that has a quarry, and this is on Stockton Island. And for those of you who have walked Stockton Island, this is the main boat landing on Stockton Island if you come in by boat. This is the Quarry Bay boat landing. This isn't as deep. Okay, so if you come in with the big tour boat, you probably have to go over here on this one. But if you have your own boat or a smaller tour boat, you can pull right into here. And then it's about a 1.5 mile walk from here over into the quarry, which is out here. I used to bring my students from Ashland here. And there's a real nice ledge up here, and we tied a rope up there. And we used to swing off that cliff and do flips and land in the lake down below it. Some of you have probably done that because I've seen other ropes and stuff out there for it. Because all the old quarry junk is laying around out there. There's old cables, there's old pieces of derrick, there's stuff laying there. And then you can walk through the old quarries. There are several quarries in here. Pits, I should say. It's one quarry, but there are several different pits. And you can walk around on those trails. And that's a pretty good hike too. This was the Ashland Brownstone Company quarry on Stockton Island. Say all the quarries were owned by different people. That's why they have different names, that they own them. And as they tell you here, they average men of 75 people. Now the quarries, these are older. And so these were before they had all the equipment that was run on gasoline and other stuff. So these quarries had to have men doing it by hand. And so they had big groups of people to do that. Okay, I'm going to just mention a couple things here, and then I'm going to take our break, because I said I would, and it's been about 20 minutes, and we'd take our little break. But The reason quarries disappeared, and we don't have them up here anymore, was not because the stone wasn't good. The stone was terrific, it lasts, the buildings are all still around. People got sick of the old brown, dark brownstone. And they started to develop new stuff to make buildings, which was steel, okay, and concrete. And once those came into being, it was so much easier to put up a building with steel frame or concrete frame than it was to cut all these pieces and fit them. When I show you a couple buildings later, I'm not going to show many, but you'll see the whole building has all different size stone. So you got to have a number 3 for here, a number 8 for here, a number 14 for here, and somebody's got to sit and figure that out with labor intense building these buildings. And so when the new stuff came out, the brownstone fell behind. I don't think there's been a new brownstone building in this area since about 1915. I could be wrong, I don't know all of them. But that's the guesstimate I would use for the last brownstone building that was built in our area. Most of them are still here, however. As I said, another month I'll be doing a talk in Ashland, and I'm doing the brownstone buildings of Ashland. And I tell the history of them and all of that. But today we're just doing quarries, so I won't get into it. But it's kind of interesting. Now these are all the quarries that are located in Bayfield County. The stuff I just showed you was where? Ashland County, because the islands, most of the islands, are in Ashland County, and all those quarries are in Ashland County. But everything from here over, this is Bayfield County, right, all through here. And I've numbered them, if you say, my numbers are kind of goofy, somebody told me, but that's okay. I started with number 1 over here, because I live here. So that's why I started with number 1. That's why I did it, okay? And so 1 came this way, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and you notice down here, it gives you a name for them, right? So we have the Sisquat Point, or Romans Point Quarry, the Cranberry Quarry, the Port Wing, the Flag, and the Iron River. Those are over here. And then over here, we have the quarries over by Washburn. And we have Pike's Quarry, Washburn, the Stone, Apprentice Quarry, and the Hatley Brothers Quarry. Okay? So these are all the ones that I'm going to show you. We'll go in them, we'll see some pictures of them, and I think that's where I'm going to take my break right here, because I have 25 minutes too. Is that correct? Okay? So. Second half coming up. We're now going to be on the Romans Point Quarry. And I have a little statistics on each one here. So there's a couple little things I'll read, and then the rest of it we'll just talk about it as we go through. But the Romans Point Quarry, or Sisquat Point Quarry, which you saw on the map as number 1, right, which is in Sisquat Bay. Well, actually it isn't. It's in Park Bay, now that I think about it, because it's on the other side. It's on the west side of Park Point. And Sisquat Bay is the east side of Park Point. They did that a lot with naming the quarries. The quarries were named incorrectly, and they were listed in the wrong place several times. When I went looking for all these quarries, I couldn't find some of them. And the next one that we're going to go to, it took Marge and I 2 trips out there to find it, because where they said it was in the book, it wasn't there at that town range and section. So we had to explore the shoreline and try to find it. So occasionally you're going to find stuff that you might disagree with, and that's perfectly okay. Disagree, I might be wrong. Because most of this I've got by just looking it up in the history books. I also wanted to mention, which I forgot to do, that we have a really nice old building from the quarries down in the park in between Washburn and Bayfield. Which park is that, Paul?
Oh, Bayview Park.
Bayview Park. Okay, Paul took one of the old buildings that used to be at Houghton, right? Okay, and he fixed it up and put it down there, and you can tour it and go through it, and it's from the quarries at Houghton Point. He has some absolutely fantastic dioramas, if any of you have seen them. They've been up in the museum here in Washburn, so you've maybe seen them. They're models of what the quarries looked like years ago. and they're just outstanding, really good. And he even had a little one in the, gosh, it was like your table there, wasn't it, that you had, that you took around to places that you could see? Yeah, so there's some really great stuff that you can find out about some of these. But the Romans Point Quarry, and I'm going to just read a couple things and then talk, was open from 1902 to 1914. That's the length of time that was open. It was owned by John Knight, okay? And that's about it, I guess. I'll say about it. And now I'll tell you where you're looking at. So that's just the information. Now there are 3 separate sections for this quarry. This is the, oh, I should mention, every one of these is privately owned. You are not to go in there without permission. And I want to make that very clear, because if all of a sudden 100 of you show up in somebody's yard next week and you say, well, Tom told us all about it when we come here. You can't go there, okay, without permission. If you get permission to go, which is what I do when I take my classes in, and I know there's at least a dozen of you in here that have been in these with me, with our classes that have gone in there. But get permission, please, so we don't have arguing and fighting that you're trespassing. But this is Brad Schultz's quarry on Romans Point. And right up on the top, up here, he's got a nice little bench you can sit and look out over the thing and see what it looks like. And this is the old stairway that came in. You see the smooth walls on this side. It's kind of a neat quarry. This is the one further out on the point. This is another section of the same quarry, but a different pit. And I'll show you some neat stuff on this. One of the things that I mentioned when we first started out, these pictures aren't going to be overly beautiful things because they're old. These quarries, you know, were all 100 years ago. And you can see the size of the trees that have grown back in right on the rocks, and you'll see some really big ones later on. But you can see how it worked. This is starting at the top. This is the point on Romans Point, way out on the tip of the point. And it's on the west side of the point. So if you're walking out the point, it'd be on your left side. And this is a stairway. I don't know if you can see it. See the person going down the stairway? Right there, they're walking down. There you're looking back at it. And so if you look over here, here's the stairway they were walking down right here. Then there's a stairway they're walking down here. Now look at the trees inside of here are huge. This was all open, empty quarry. But in 100 years, things change. There's all kinds of big piles. Can you see them here? Of rock and rubble and stuff down in there that was just left. Every quarry I've been in has leftover stones in it because it didn't pay to send a boat out there to pick up 4 stones from Duluth. So whatever didn't fit in the boat was usually left behind. This is backing off so you really get a nice picture. Here's Lake Superior over here. Here's the stairways coming down. This quarry comes all the way back, all the way down here. It's a huge, big quarry. But you would never just walking by or driving by think that was anything in your boat. Yeah, well, there's rocks and there's a bunch of trees growing in it because they've really changed. Our second one that we're going to go to, now we were right here just a minute ago, number 1, right here, Siskiwet Point or Romans Point Quarry. This one, this number 2, is the Cranberry River Quarry. Anybody ever hear of it even? No. Nobody in Herbster knew there was one. Okay? It's, you cannot see it from the road. You can't find it from the road. The best way to find some of these quarries is by taking your boat along the shoreline and looking in to see what's going on. But I was too stupid to do that, so I went walking looking for the quarry. And it took me 2 times to find it. But it's in a beautiful location. Okay? Here you are as you walk in from up above. You walk in off of Highway 13, and it's maybe, quarter mile in that you have to walk in. And you're on this, you'd think you were out in Hawaii somewhere, looking at that beautiful long beach. That's all a totally private beach on Lake Superior, because you can't get into it unless you go through somebody's property. And there are a couple houses along up here. You can't get into the quarry anymore either. So, and this is kind of a unique thing, but it's a little hard to see. But if you look, see this guy here? He's hanging on to something. Okay, there's a rope that was tied to a tree up here. And we went, how many of you went down that rope with me? Some of you in here did, I know. Okay, we went down this rope, down the next ledge down, and as you go further down, look how thick it is. You can't even see where you're going. You can't tell there's a quarry. But we got down in there and there's rocks piled all over. This is what the shoreline looked like. You'll see the cut marks in a minute where they actually drill those holes. There's blocks piled up in the middle of the thing for the old quarry. But they are so unique in that they've been left undisturbed for over 100 years. This stuff is as natural as the day they did it. It just amazes me when you go into them. So this was the one in Herbster, okay? If we move on now, we come over here. This is Port Wing and this is Port Wing. So there were two separate quarries in Port Wing. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this one. Some stats on it. This opened in 1895. So that wasn't that much difference because Basswood Island was like 86. So that didn't open that much later. So it was open a long time. But they have it in the wrong place in the directions where I found it in the books. That wasn't where it was, so it took me a while to build it. But they have two quarries in town, and there's no buildings made out of brownstone because there wasn't anybody there to cut them and shape them, so they had to put them on the boat. The railroad never ran through here, so they couldn't ship them out by railroad car, so they had big derricks that set them out of the quarry onto the ledge, and then onto the ledge into the boat. And you'll see there's some neat places here along the lake where these big boulders were set and dumped out into the ships as you walk along here. But this is, again, all private property, and it is posted, and it does say keep out, okay? But if you learn who the people that own them are, and you can do that by merely going to the courthouse, and it's not secret information, and you can look up who owns it, and then I would contact those people, and when I told them I was bringing a bunch of old fuddy-duddies, they all said, fine. Now you know what I called some of you guys, right? I didn't take young kids here. Everybody in my class was pretty old. And I don't want to embarrass anybody, but they went anywhere from in their 40s and 50s to in their 90s. Okay? We had Erickson from Port Wing in our class, and she was 92 when she was in the class out hiking around with us. So when I said I'm bringing old people, they, oh sure, take them in. They're not going to steal my stuff or wreck my stuff. So in we'd go. Now this is an inland quarry. It's away from the lake. And you notice it's all just stone about it. You wouldn't even think those are deep pools. You can swim in them, you can dive in some of them. They're deep, but they filled with water. Because it was inland, they had to dig deep down to get the stone. On the shoreline, you can't go below the water level. The minute you get down there, it floods. But inland, you can. But if this sat over winter or the second winter, then it started filling up with water, and then they had to get pumps and drain them all out. When I get to the Bodine quarry, you'll see they used to have pumps to drain out there. They gave up on that, and now they just use it as a swimming hole and dive in it and stuff. But this is what they start to look like. And you can see they went in long walls all along here, cut in here, walls over here. But walking by or going through it in the wintertime, they don't look like anything. They just look like, well, yeah, there's a rock ledge there or something. But these were all quarried out. Here again, just big flat walls. There's one coming, here we go. Okay, somebody asked me what a channeler did. And the channeler was just a little stiff blade that went down. Now they didn't use channelers in all quarries. Many quarries used cable. And some people mentioned that to me. And the melon quarry, for one. Have you been down into the melon quarries down in that area? I used to take the kids from Ashland High School down there. They'd let kids in there because that was a big company-owned quarry. And they had a big long cable. I bet you that cable had to be a half a mile long. That went around the whole thing and over, and then they sawed with that cable that had grit on it of some kind that made it saw and cut down through there, and then it wouldn't get hot because it'd go out and cool off and then come back through and it would cool off. Because it was so long it had time to cool before they brought it back through the thing again. But that's what they make. They cut these things down. just like this, so they could break them off. Another thing that somebody mentioned during the break here that was true that we didn't get to was in the fall of the year when they closed, because they didn't quarry in the winter, a lot of these holes were drilled, but they weren't channeled. They just filled them with water. Why do you suppose that was? They broke off when they expanded, right? So if they filled the holes and left them, they didn't have to run the channeler through, because that was expensive. They had to have people to do that, run that, it took time. To give you an example, stone is rated from 1 to 5, and the hard stone that really is hard, you can saw maybe 6 to 10 inches in an hour. That's all you can channel through it. In the softer stone, you can do 30, 40 inches in an hour. But the softer stone can't be used for buildings that have more than 1 story. And that's why, again, and somebody came up and mentioned this at the break also, another reason the brownstone buildings went away is not only because of concrete and because of steel, but because you couldn't go much more than 5 stories high with a brownstone building. The weight of the stone above would crush the stone down below because it was so heavy. The biggest building in Ashland used to be the Night Hotel. That had 5 full stories all the way up in it. How many of you remember the Night? Some of you are old enough, right? I came here, it was still in Ashland. When I came here in 1955, the Night Hotel was still up. And so we used to go in there. They had a ballroom in there. They had a bar in there. They had apartments in there that you could rent for the month. And then they also just had rooms that you would rent like a motel. But it was a big building. It was beautiful. But we're not getting into buildings too much. So anyway, here's looking off the cliff. The same area in early spring. You can see the cliff here, and then you see there's no ice down there. It's water right down in the pits as they drop off on these ledges. If you move over about a mile and go west from the first quarry, you come to the second quarry in Port Wing. Okay? And this is a private person's place again. She was in my class, so we didn't have any trouble going here. And we walked down this stairway, and this is a shoreline quarry now. And you see the difference, all the junk and rubble and laying around, because when they did cut, no matter how careful they were, or when they did drill, no matter how careful they were, stuff broke. You know, it's just there was some kind of thing in there that shouldn't be in there, some impurity, some stone that got in there, and when they were trying to break it off as a nice even row, it fell apart. And so you see all this stuff laying around, and see, can you see the channel mark in that? That was actually channeled. They went down and cut down in there, and you'll see these much better in a minute. But they broke. It wasn't always the best way you could do it. Here's where we were just coming down the stairs, and this is a smooth wall back on this side, and the other side is really nice. That's where the quarry was, and I think I have a picture of that in a minute here. But here's going along, and there's so much of this. You always think this is all so neat and stuff, but they had so much junk they had to get rid of. But they didn't let it go to waste. That was used what we call rubble, stuff that broke, and it was used in filling in areas. It was used in buildings. If you look on the foundations in the buildings in Ashland, in the old part of town, almost every building in Ashland, its foundation was rubble. Go look sometime. They're board buildings, and they're put up on top of it, but they used this rubble to make the footings, and they were cemented in, made a basement. There must be some in Washburn I haven't looked at carefully, but I'm sure they're here. But Ashland, when you drive through the old part of town, go up from the library and start up, going away from the lake, and you'll see almost every house there is made out of this stuff at the bottom, all the stuff. It didn't go to waste. It was sold and used. Here you go. Here's channeling. See the lines in here now? That's where that channeler that they sat there, that drills, those were done by hand, I said, with a big pole to begin with. Remember, they held it up here, the guy pounded on it and pounded it down in, and they made these holes. And then those holes were sawed between with the channeler so that you could get a nice smooth thing. But again, Lake Superior stone by accident can break off that smooth. But you have no guarantee what size the piece is going to be or anything. You can maybe use it, you can't. And if you try to break it up, once it's off, it probably will fall apart on you. Okay, next one. You don't watch my. We're going over here to the Iron River Quarry. How many have been to the Iron River? Some of you have been in my class, right? The Iron River used to have a power plant on it. It's just past Port Wing, going towards Superior. And Bayfield Electric had a dam there, and a big power plant. About 1985 or 6, that dam washed out, and the whole thing went downriver. And so if you look right here, and that's why I put the picture in, the dam was right across here. Here was the dam. Now there's a little wall down here yet that is still there, but that backed up a whole lake behind this thing. And there were cottages on it, everything. When that dam went out, everybody lost their lake. Now they're sitting high and dry. It was gone. If you go into the quarry down there, though, it's a fascinating place. And this one is on public property, finally. Okay? So you can go in here anytime you want. There's a nice new parking lot. You go down to Orienta Falls Road. As you're going on Highway 13, out of Port Wing going towards Superior, you'll see Orienta Falls Road. Take a left, follow it to the end. It takes a hard turn. Don't go straight. They put a new parking lot there. And it says Orienta Falls. And I've taken, I don't know how many people from Port Wing into this quarry, and they never knew it was there. Because you walk down and you go down to the dam. The guys would go down there and fish below the dam and catch fish. But you had to walk off into the woods a little ways to get to the quarry, and they didn't see it. But this is fascinating, and it's a high quarry. Look at the size of the trees that are growing in there already. And this is like 3 layers deep, this quarry went. It was really amazing. And I have an old picture coming up, I hope. Yeah. This is what it looked like back in 1898. And you can see here the derrick. That's down here, and this is in the hole, in the bottom of the hole, which is unusual. Many of the derricks are on top to lift the stones out. But this was so high, they built the derrick right down here in the bottom. And then these were 3 layers they went up. And up on top, this was inland. So what do you do with the stone? So they put in the narrow gauge railroad track like the loggers used. Many of you are familiar with that, right? They laid railroad gauge down so they could haul the logs down to the lake or to a river where they could dump them and bring them back by raft. Well, they did the same thing here, and they took it to the mouth of the Iron River. There's a boat landing there, if any of you have been down at the mouth of the Iron River, and there was a big dock there with another derrick. How did they get the cart down there? Gravity down, horses back. Yep. It was all downhill from here to the lake, so they would go down with gravity down to the lake, and then they had horses that would pull the carts back up to here, railroad flat cars. And they'd bring them up to here, and then they'd stack them with the cranes back up into there. But look at this, it's so unique if you've never been in a quarry. The ladders, and people crawling around on that thing, and hammering and chiseling, and it had to be a dangerous job. And to me, it scared the tar out of me holding one of those things while some guy was swinging that sledge down on those. That would have been a job I did not want. Okay? Here's what it looks like from down below where the old dam was. I just put that in as a point. But the dam went across up here, and the waterfall was over here. So this was the old Orienta Falls. Now this is just a little thing, maybe 10 feet high that comes through there. But it was a huge dam. And when you walk up, and those of you that have been here, you know, you can walk up right here. And this goes up the trail here on the Brownstone, right? You can see it. And this path goes back up to the top that way, or into the quarry down this way. Now, if you don't know what to do someday, go out here, okay? It's worth walking out. Don't go if it's raining, okay? It's all clay on top. You'll fall and break your neck. Guaranteed. It's a steep hill going down, and you don't want to walk in that. It's really steep. So I'm not sending you there to get hurt. So don't go if it's been raining, because it's very, very slippery. Okay, where did I leave off? 5? Okay. Then we're going over to Pike's Quarry. Now we're back in our area. Let me give you a little rundown over there. Pike's Quarry was open from 1883 to 1897 originally, but again, Pike's Quarry has many pits. Some up on the highway, some down on the lake. You have to walk around to find them all. There's got to be at least 6 different pits there for Pike's Quarry. And so it's kind of a unique place. And if you look, it's up in here, up in this area. Okay, it's, you know where the fish hatchery is? When you're going up towards Bayfield? Okay, as you climb the hill, you'll see a quarry on your left, but the big quarries are all on the right. But they're all privately owned. So is the one on the left, by the way, but they're privately owned. You're going to see a quarry in here that's out of this world. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, this is Pike's Quarry, the one on the highway. If you drive by on the highway and stop your car and look in, this is what you'll see. And this is another picture of the same thing. There's water in the bottom and it's all grown over. And you can see the wall back here, so you know it was a quarry, but it doesn't look much like a quarry, okay? There's when you climb the hill and go up above, you're looking down into it. Here's another old quarry, okay? This one is just a dream thing to see. You notice we're going down a stairway here, beautiful stairway. Notice there's a slate sidewalk all down and along the quarry. This is a shoreline quarry. Here's Lake Superior. If you look out here in Lake Superior, they have 2 huge pumps in the water. And these pumps pump the water in a tube up to the top of the hill. Okay, and then if we go to the top of the hill, they shoot the water back over and make a waterfall, which I'll show you where that is later on. So they've really taken this quarry and developed it. It is beautiful. To my knowledge, this place is for rent. And you can rent this cabin, it's very expensive, and have your parties down here and the whole bit. We did get permission to take the group in there, but it's a unique place. Now we're going to go down the steps, and here's looking back. Estimates are, these are estimates, I don't know if it's true or not, but estimates are that this stairway cost about $50,000. Okay? It's an all steel stairway, all steel posts, steel steps, everything. And you saw us going down it a minute ago. And this is in one of the old Pike's pits, along for the Pike's Quarry. And you come down, now if you go this way, and you kept walking up here, then you'll come up to the neighbors' areas, and there's some more quarries up there, but they're not like this. They're just old quarries with the drill marks in, which you'll see when you go along that way. But I put a few in to show you the rest of this. Okay, here's the waterfall, and they pump the water up above here and make a waterfall that comes down into here. There's no water running now because nobody was staying here, and we were just in there for the day. We weren't paying customers, so they didn't turn it on for us. Okay, here's the benches by the waterfall. You see you can sit here and there's big flower pots, and here again you see the slate sidewalk along the bottom that you can walk down to. There's music piped in. There's speakers all around here, so you can sit and have your party and your cocktails and watch the waterfall and the music. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now here's the trail going away, where I said before, if you kept going this way, there's more quarries over here, owned by different people. But here's the difference. Here's what they look like, okay? These are the quarries on the other side. You see the drill marks, right? They drilled down, and everything else is out. They've hauled all the rocks out of there, and they just leave it. They haven't done anything to it. The other people put a lot of money in and fixed it up as a recreational area. And if you haven't been there, boy, I would try to make arrangements. It is breathtaking. Okay, now moving into Houghton, okay? The next quarries we're going to talk about, 7, 8, and 9, are Washburn Stone Company, the Prentice Quarry, and Hartley Brothers Quarries. These quarries, again, all have many pits, so they don't have just one place where they quarry. There's many of them. And again, they're all private owned. And you know some of the people, but I'm not naming names, but you know most of them are people around town here who you're probably familiar with that own most of these quarries. In fact, one has a big resort on it, which you'll see in a minute as we go along. But to give you just a little rundown on when these were, Number 7, the Washburn Stone Company opened in 1885, okay? And then they closed it down and moved it to a new spot because it wasn't doing well. And that's what I mean by pits. There's an old pit where it was, but it isn't a big one because it didn't work. And so then they went somewhere else where they could get more stone. What else did they say about it? That's enough of it anyway. I'm running out of time, so I gotta get out of here. Okay, this is at Bodine's, which most of you are familiar with, and they had a pile of rocks laying here. They tore down an old brownstone building, and this is to justify what I told you about. I put this in here. What's on there? 14, you all see it? Okay, how'd they say they built these places? They put numbers on the rocks. So the architect made a big plat of the thing, you know, and he drew all the stuff and said, okay, these are number 3 stones that go under the window. These are number 6 stones that go over the top or whatever. And then these stones were all marked and put into the buildings. So it was all set up and cut somewhere else, and then hauled down to the site and put in. This is the quarry there at Bodine's Resort. If I can say that one, I guess you've all been there. So anyway, and here's his old dock. People dive off of there, swim off of there. If you go to the museum here in town, you'll see that this is where the first lumberjack contest in the state of Wisconsin was. Now it's at Hayward, but the first one was here in this quarry pit. This is where they had their log rolling and stuff in here. Kind of interesting. And this is down at the shoreline. And it's a mess. Okay, but keep in mind, this is where they had all the old docks, right, and all things to haul. But all of the quarries in Houghton had both ways to get rid of stones. They had railroad and they had docks. So they could go out both ways, depending on which way they were going. Some of this stone did go up to Duluth, and then it went by boat back up to there. And some of it went south and all over the country. There are big brownstone areas, though, in New England. So our stone never went that far east, because there's a lot of brownstone in New England, and they had quarries before we did. And I told you in Massachusetts, the first church was built out of brownstone. Remember that? Okay, so there's all old railroad ties and cables and junk from in the quarry. This is the Prentice Quarry. Some of you have been there. You can see that from the road. The Prentice Quarry was famous for cutting out the largest piece of brownstone ever taken out in one piece. You can go down to your museum here in town, and you'll see a little miniature one out in front of it, right? This big, tall pyramid thing. And this is where it was cut. Here's a picture from one of the magazines of it. And here you see it laying here. This was 110 feet long. It never came out of the pit in one piece. It was cut loose in the pit. So it was the largest stone ever cut. But then they cut it up into little pieces, and it went to the Chicago World's Fair. And some of it went as animals, and they cut it into different statues and things and sent it down there. But they did not take this 110-foot piece. It would have been a world record. It was a world record to cut it free, to cut a piece that big in one piece without it splitting or shattering or breaking. Because they're sawing and pounding and hacking, you know, on this stuff. And to keep it was pretty phenomenal that they could do that. I gotta look at my watch. I'm out of time. Okay? So I think I'll quit here and take questions. Okay? The next one, they're just flipped through there and kind of the same thing. The last one, there are quarries along the shoreline and pictures like that. So, any questions? Yes?
Is there any market for those pieces that have been left?
Yes. They're all on private property. So now they tried to do a little shipping out of the one at Pike's Quarry there, and they shut him down too. They wouldn't let him take it out anymore, even though it was on his property. So I don't know if it's legal at all anymore to use it. But there's a lot of stone laying around. Like I said, you see piles of it all in different places. But I don't think it can be used. That's just an opinion. Any other questions?
Tom,
Yes,
On behalf of my former employer, I'd like to correct you.
okay,
The dam on the Iron River was owned by Lake Superior District Power
okay,
Company and then Northern States Power Company.
not Bayfield Electric.
Not Bayfield.
All right,
And additionally, it was
Good.
an 800 kW plant. It had a head of 46 feet, and over the years, the entire reservoir had filled it with sand. So the only time you got any production out of it was when you had the big storm that it eventually washed it out. So it would run very short periods of time, and then it would go back to very low levels.
I was very fortunate to have him along in my class, so he can spout all this information out. I can't remember it all. So I stand corrected, Lake Superior, right? Yes,
Could you name some of the buildings? I know you have them in the book that you made, the booklet.
Yeah.
Some of the buildings that were made of brownstone from this area?
well, what happened to my other book? Here. They're all in here, or a good share of them are in here. This is all the ones here in Washburn.
But wasn't there one in Duluth, like?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
They built buildings all over the United States, from quarries up here, yes. Like I said, the first one was built in Milwaukee, from the stone up here, the courthouse. Yes, they were taken everywhere. Once they got the train up to Ashland, things changed, really big time. Yes,
Do they preserve or store any of the brownstone that has come down, like from the Metropolitan Building in the Twin Cities?
yes.
Or Night Hotel?
Many of the buildings that they take down, then the stone is sold for replacing other buildings that are having troubles or stuff like that, or being made into something. People have made them into sheds and garages. You can buy the old stone, yes.
Well, rumor has it that the high school buried the stone.
They might have.
Huh.
I wouldn't argue with that. I taught in that high school, the old Brownstone High School. And so I can remember it clearly. I had the corner room facing Ellis Avenue, right on the bottom floor. And you were in it. I was there. I had a lot of people in class. I taught in Washburn, which most people don't know either. In 1960, I taught in Washburn at the high school. In fact, Dick is in here. I had him in class, a couple of people in here, yeah, here in Washburn. So I've been around the area a long time. Any other questions that I could screw up? Yes. Brownstone in Chicago did come from this area, but it might have come from other places too. There's no guarantee. But ours did go to Chicago, yes. Is that what you asked? Yes. Yeah. But other places were quarrying. I showed you in the very short, one of the first slides I showed all along the south shore of Lake Superior brownstone. Remember that? So there were other people quarrying and using the stone, not just this area. Yes.
Just a comment, I was in Washington DC a few years ago, and across the street I could see a brownstone building.
Yep.
So I was immediately drawn to it, harvested from Chequamegon Bay
All right.
in
Great.
Washington DC.
Yes. Okay. Now they have their own quarries also, and as we said, but that doesn't mean, just like up here, you know, if you buy lumber from somebody, it could come from just about anywhere to build your house with, you know. It could have come from some trees over by Minnesota. It could have come from over here somewhere where they came from. So our stone was shipped all over the U.S. from this area. But I don't know every building that was built everywhere from it. But we do have the ones that were built here. And like I said, I'm doing a talk next month in Ashland about their brownstone buildings and where they came from, and when they were built and when they were torn down and what they were used for. I'm not talking about buildings here because all the experts are in this room, not me. They're the ones that wrote the book. So if you want to talk to them, talk to them. Any other questions? Oh, hand up.
So which is the quarry that you can see up by Whiting Road up on the hill on the way to?
Pikes. That's one of Pike's quarries, yes. Yep. Yep, now you know. It's right on the highway when you drive by. And on the left side of that highway when you're driving by, there's at least 5 more in there as you're driving along the lakeshore area. And the pretty fancy one that we looked at is in there too. Just down from that one just a little ways. Maybe half a mile. Any other questions? Yep.
When and where is your class in Ashland?
Say that again?
When and where is your class that you're going to be talking in Ashland?
When and was.
Oh.
Oh, the one I'm going to do now?
Yeah.
It's in February It's on a Monday at the Hotel Chequamegon. I think it's around the 8th. I'm not sure when the dates are. It'll probably be in the paper, but it's there. And we're gonna talk about, like I say, buildings and stuff there. Yes?
What is it that makes the stone brown? Is it the chemical composition or the stone that it's made of?
Well, it's basically the color of the sand up in this area that does it. It isn't a dye that was put in it or anything. But most brownstone, as I said, is made of sandstone. And the sandstone was washed into the lake and deposited, and then was pressed down. There are some impurities in it. Which ones, I don't know. I'm not a chemist, or I couldn't tell you.
Iron oxide.
Yeah, but I mean, where it came from, I don't know. Yes?
Was there a distinctive color to the sand depending on East Coast or here?
Yeah, there's color to the sand in the quarries here. Some of the quarries here had browner stone, some had red stone, some had impurities in them, white spots in them. They were all different. And so you, depending on what you were building, you had to pay more money for them, okay? As the pure ones with no impurities, no stones in it, or no discoloration, cost more than the other ones. So look at buildings and you'll see that. Yes?
So did this form of brownstone form the edge of the Great Lake, the old lake?
Yes.
So that was the edge?
Yes. That's how far it extended when it was under what was called Glacial Lake Duluth, which was much higher, and it went all the way down to the Great Divide. Okay? And some of you have hiked the Brule River Trail with me. We hiked the Portage Trail at Brule River, and that's where the lake came to. Lake Superior came down to that big cliff when you're hiking. I'm trying to think what road it's on. But anyway, it was much, much bigger than it is now. Yes.
Are there any bits and pieces of the channeling saws anywhere in any museums around here? Actual channeling
Yes.
saws?
The museum in Port Wing. Now, it used to be open on Thursdays. I don't have any idea anymore. Okay, I have no idea what day it's open. But that's where I got most of my pictures, the old ones, from. They had all the tools there, the equipment there. They had little blips about all the different quarries around the area. Lots of pictures, great spot. You want me to sit down, right? One more
No,
question.
stand up, stay
Yeah,
there.
one more question, anybody?
I got one.
Yeah, back here.
When I put this in my column, what's the main thing you want people to know about brownstone quarries?
Probably that it was one of the big things that got this area going, okay? Made it grow. All these people were working in these quarries and shipping things at the docks, and the railroads that came through here to pick them up. And Ashland just boomed during those times. I read you the figures in the beginning, how many people were here, because there was work, right? There were jobs for people. And you still can't live up here coming in here as a kid without a job. You gotta have it. I'm quitting. Thank you very much.